Hello, everyone. I'm Amber, and I'm about to share a story about my mother-in-law's actions toward me and how I managed to handle the situation. My mother-in-law, Patricia, was always curious about my inheritance, often asking, "Amber, when will you receive your inheritance?" I heard it's around $35 million. We could lead such a luxurious life with that kind of money. It's taking forever to process, isn't it? These words, openly shared by Patricia since I married her son Raymond, showed her interest in my financial matters. At first, I naively informed her about my inheritance, which in hindsight was a huge mistake. After that, Patricia became overly friendly at times. Her constant inquiries were bothersome, but I didn't give it much thought. However, my husband Raymond and father-in-law Gary would often reprimand her, telling her, "Patricia, you need to stop bothering Amber about her inheritance. It's irrelevant when or if she receives it. It's none of our concern." Raymond even pointed out, "Mom, you're being incredibly rude and irritating. Amber and I are doing well financially. We're even supporting you and Dad. What more could you possibly want?" Despite this, Patricia dreamed aloud of a more luxurious lifestyle, suggesting we could abandon our current home for a mansion. Her fixation on the money was clear. Attempting to shift the conversation, I joked, "Who knows if I'll ever receive the inheritance? The process is complex, and for all you know, I might have made up the entire thing." This comment made everyone laugh except Patricia, who gave me a stern look, visibly upset by my words. Following that incident, Patricia's demeanor toward me shifted drastically. She became openly hostile and insulting, a clear indication of her greed and how deeply my words had affected her. Her behavior worsened, demonstrating an unanticipated level of animosity when she realized I might not be as wealthy as she thought. A turning point came when Patricia took her frustrations out on me directly. One day, while Raymond and Gary were away, I encountered Patricia in the kitchen with a look of disdain. She demanded I follow her to her room, signaling the start of an unexpected and challenging confrontation. Patricia called me aside with urgency, insisting we needed to speak in private immediately. She mentioned it was critical, but her insistence only made me more curious and a bit apprehensive. Deep down, a thought flickered through my mind, connecting her sudden urgency to a post-nuptial agreement, though I wasn't entirely sure why the thought lingered. Not wanting to be left in the dark, I followed her to her room. Upon entering, Patricia locked the door behind us, an action that caught me completely off guard. Holding the keys tightly in her hand, she demanded, "Amber, you're staying in here until you sign these papers." I was stunned, questioning her motives and the extremity of her actions. Patricia explained rather forcefully that she wanted me to sign a post-nuptial agreement drawn up by a lawyer. This document was supposed to ensure that I wouldn't be entitled to any financial claim against Raymond if we ever divorced. I was taken aback, unable to fathom her reasoning or why she would assume Raymond, and I would end our marriage. Despite my protests and disbelief over the divorce insinuation, Patricia was adamant. She insisted on me signing the papers, claiming she had the situation under control and implying she would play a role in our marital future. Reluctantly, I began to read the document, curious about its contents and the extent of its demands. The agreement was stringent, stipulating that in the event of a divorce, Raymond and I would have no financial claims on each other, denying alimony or any form of asset division. This meant we could only retain assets that were individually in our names. The terms were shocking and sparked immediate anger within me. Confronting Patricia, I questioned the necessity and the suddenness of such a document. We had never discussed any form of prenuptial or postnuptial agreement before. Her actions in the presentation of the agreement were not only unexpected, but seemed to hint at deeper issues and intentions. The situation had escalated far beyond simple family dynamics, signaling a complex web of intentions and potential conflicts. Patricia revealed her true colors, admitting she had initially welcomed me into the family because she believed I would inherit $35 million, which would eliminate the need for a prenuptial agreement for her son. Now accusing me of lying and labeling me a precious metal, she claimed I was a financial burden to Raymond and demanded I sign a prenup to safeguard his assets before plotting our separation. It became crystal clear to me. Patricia's silence on a prenup all these years was due to her hope of benefiting from my supposed inheritance. Discovering the inheritance might be a mirage, she now aimed to strip me of any future claims on Raymond's assets. Her manipulative plan was to fabricate a story or create a scenario that would drive Raymond to divorce me, favoring a wealthier match to ensure a luxurious life for her family. Patricia's disdain was palpable as she insisted Raymond deserved better than to marry someone without significant inheritance flood, only disregarding our relationship and the love that bound youth. Her vision was clouded by greed, seeing me only as a hindrance to a fanciful life. Stealers, she had sneered. Her words were a mix of fury and revelation. For me, I had always sensed a certain tension from Raymond and Gary toward Patricia, but her blatant greed and disregard for our marriage's sanctity were appalling. This encounter revealed her willingness to sacrifice her son's happiness for material gain, a realization that only deepened my gratitude for having no such inheritance to bind me to her expectations. Determined not to let Patricia's manipulations dictate my actions, I stood firm against signing the postnuptial agreement she brandished. If Raymond believed such an agreement was necessary, I insisted it be a decision made together with proper legal counsel, not a unilateral demand from his mother. I refused to comply with her demands, aware that she might not let me leave without conceding, but ready to confront her armed with the truth and the integrity of my relationship with Raymond at the forefront. Patricia seemed to relish the control she had over me, noting that Raymond and Gary wouldn't be back from their fishing trip for a while, and leveraging the fact that my work was calling me back to my duties. Desperate to return to my responsibilities, I demanded the keys, eager to escape her grasp. But Patricia escalated the situation, grabbing my hand painfully and berating me, accusing me of being a precious metal, among other cruel accusations. My anxiety soared as her grip tightened, and her screams filled my ears, all while my boss continued to call, expecting my return to work. Feeling trapped and overwhelmed by Patricia's intimidation and the pressure of my pending work responsibilities, I reluctantly signed the document she presented with a satisfied smirk. Patricia released me, and I quickly fled the room the moment she unlocked the door, locking myself in another room to find solace and safety. Once alone, I reached out to my boss, explaining the ordeal with Patricia. She was incredibly understanding and supportive, appalled by Patricia's actions. She kindly offered me the day off to recover from the distressing incident. I documented the physical evidence of Patricia's aggression, photographing the bruising on my arm, a stark reminder of the lengths she would go to. My frustration and anger mounted as I reflected on her actions and determined that she should face consequences for her behavior. Choosing not to disturb Raymond and Gary with a call while they were away, I waited for their return to address the incident in person. When they arrived the next day, cheerful from their trip, the atmosphere quickly shifted as they sensed the tension between Patricia and me. Raymond, sensing something was amiss, approached me for answers, but I requested some time before delving into the details. Seizing the moment, Patricia swiftly engaged Raymond in a conversation, presumably to discuss the prenuptial agreement, unaware of the confrontation that had transpired in their absence. The situation was poised on the brink of revelation, with each of us holding pieces of a story yet to be fully unveiled. Not long after, Patricia summoned Raymond. He descended the stairs visibly upset and frustrated, holding the controversial document in hand. He confronted his father. "What is this all about, Dad? Did you know about these papers?" He was referring to the post-nuptial agreement his mother had orchestrated. Gary, taken aback, genuinely knew nothing of the scheme. "What papers are you talking about, Raymond? What postnup?" he questioned, bewildered by the sudden tension. Raymond explained, "It's a ridiculous postnup Mom cooked up for Amber and me." It was clear he found the entire situation absurd and unjustifiable. Gary immediately clarified, "Raymond, I'm completely out of the loop here. I have no idea what this is about." His confusion and surprise were palpable, directing his gaze towards Patricia for an explanation. Patricia, cornered, defended her actions under the guise of protection. "I'm doing this for our good, Raymond. Your wife, she's not going to bring anything but trouble. She's just after your money," she accused, labeling Amber a precious metal and insinuating she had lied about an inheritance to ensnare Raymond. Ray, shocked by his mother's harsh words, couldn't comprehend her logic. "What does Amber's inheritance have to do with us? How can you say such things, Mom?" he asked, struggling to understand her motives. Patricia doubled down, painting a grim picture of Amber exploiting Raymond and eventually leaving him financially drained through a divorce. She urged Raymond to sign the postnup and consider divorce, promising a future with a more financially suitable partner. This accusation ignited Raymond's anger. He vehemently defended Amber, joined by Gary, marking a rare moment of unity against Patricia's manipulations. "It was a turning point for me, seeing Raymond stand up for our relationship, dispelling any fears of his loyalty." What they both didn't know was the truth about my inheritance. It had come through the day before, a detail I hadn't shared amidst the chaos. As the argument subsided, Raymond's gaze met mine, filled with questions and concern. "Amber, why did you agree to sign that postnup? You should have waited for me. You know I'd never support such a thing. Why let Mom pressure you into this?" His disappointment was evident, yet it was mingled with a desire to understand, to rectify the situation together. I reassured Raymond, "I never doubted you would request such a thing. You've always supported me unconditionally. I had every intention to discuss the postnup with you, but I was never given the chance." I explained how Patricia had trapped me in her room, her grip unyielding until I succumbed to signing the document. My lack of choice was clear. I was coerced into giving my signature. Raymond and Gary were shocked by my account, especially as Patricia didn't attempt to refute my claims. Instead, she appeared almost smug about her actions. This only fueled the outrage in my husband and father-in-law, their disbelief turning to anger upon seeing the marks on my arm. "Mom, what have you done to Amber? How could you lay hands on my wife? This is assault," Raymond exclaimed, while Gary condemned Patricia's actions as madness. Patricia tried to justify her actions by claiming she was protecting her son from being taken advantage of, insisting she acted out of maternal instinct. But Raymond countered her claims with disgust, emphasizing that his marriage to me was never about financial gain. Patricia, still clinging to her delusions of a wealthier life, lamented Raymond's supposed promise to elevate their living standards, which she believed could only be achieved by marrying into wealth. This assertion only deepened the divide, prompting Raymond and Gary to challenge her greed and her disregard for the values that truly mattered to them. Their argument escalated as both men confronted Patricia's greed and her harmful actions. Eventually, her obstinance began to crack under the weight of their unified stand, hinting at a realization that perhaps her actions had crossed a line far beyond what was defensible. Cornered in recognizing that Gary and Raymond were not on her side, Patricia resorted to tears, attempting to sway them with her emotional outburst. She cried, claiming her actions were for the betterment of the family, insisting she deserved a better life for her sacrifices, including offering her home. She portrayed herself as the victim, wronged by those she had sheltered. Raymond responded with a reality check, reminding her that their living arrangement was mutually beneficial, highlighting that he and I were the ones financially supporting the household, not the other way around. Fed up with her manipulative tactics, he declared their decision to move out and cease financial support, signaling a drastic change prompted by her actions. Gary, too, had reached his limit. Years of enduring Patricia's greed had worn thin, especially now that she had resorted to aggression and manipulation against me. Offering a lifeline, he suggested he could leave with us, disassociating himself from Patricia's toxic behavior, affirming his support not for her actions but for us, his family by choice and by blood. Patricia, unfazed, mocked our ability to survive without her, suggesting a grim future for us in substandard living conditions. Her taunts were meant to belittle and undermine our decision, banking on the assumption of financial instability on our part. It was then I chose to reveal the truth, countering her bleak predictions with confidence. I calmly stated that housing and supporting us would not be an issue, challenging her narrative of financial doom. Patricia, still entrenched in her delusion, left off my assertion, labeling me a broken precious metal, unable to provide for Raymond and Gary without her. Her scorn was palpable, but it was based on outdated information. Taking this moment, I corrected her assumption. Far from the broke individual she painted me as, I was neither financially destitute nor a precious metal. My silence on my financial status until now had been a choice, not a necessity. And it was time Patricia understood the reality of the situation she had so grossly misjudged. Indeed, I revealed to them I'm actually quite well off, thanks to the $35 million I have access to. Not all of it is in cash, but there's more than enough to go around. This revelation took everyone by surprise, especially Patricia, who was caught off guard by the sudden shift in my financial narrative. Patricia, bewildered, challenged me. "But you said there was no inheritance. You lied." I responded a bit wearily, "Patricia, your nagging was exhausting." So I made a flippant remark about not having any inheritance, not expecting it to unveil your true intentions. Honestly, I'm thankful for that joke now. It showed me who you really are. The revelation left Patricia scrambling, her mind racing for ways to amend our fractured relationship, attempting to downplay her previous hostility. She laughed it off, claiming she thought I was serious about not having an inheritance. "Oh, Amber, you trickster, we could have avoided so much misunderstanding if only you had told us earlier," she said, trying to smooth things over. I countered, "Really, Patricia, if I had told you it was a joke, you wouldn't have pushed for that postnup or tried to sabotage my marriage, would you?" Her attempts to retract her actions, claiming she was carried away, and admitting her rudeness by tearing up the postnup agreement, were too little, too late. Firmly, I stood my ground. "Patricia, it's clear now that you shouldn't concern yourself with my inheritance. Our relationship can't be mended so easily. If Raymond is still on board with moving out and cutting ties, I'm fully supportive of that decision." This moment marked a turning point, underscoring my independence and readiness to move forward without the strain of Patricia's manipulative tactics, prioritizing my well-being and my relationship with Raymond over any financial entanglement with her. Raymond made it clear we're moving out. "Amber, my mother's greed has shown no bounds, and I refuse to let her exploit you any further. We'll leave by the end of this month, and Dad's coming with us." This decision was unanimous among us. Myself and Raymond had already started house hunting and found a perfect place an hour away. Securing a house and planning a move within a month might seem daunting to some, but our financial stability made the process smooth and efficient. As we had discussed, Gary decided to join us, stepping into a new chapter of his life as he initiated divorce proceedings against Patricia. His decision was made independently, driven by the events that unfolded, and he filed for divorce within the same month. We decided to move. Patricia, desperate and cornered, pleaded with us to reconsider, attempting to elicit sympathy through tears and apologies. However, her financial predicament only compounded her woes. Without a personal income, and with Gary's financial dependence on Raymond, neither was eligible for alimony. Interestingly, Gary was entitled to half of Patricia's house as it was acquired post-marriage, leading to an ironic twist where Patricia had to sell her home, the very outcome she feared and tried to avoid by meddling in our finances. The divorce process dragged on for a year, marked by mandatory separation periods and Patricia's visible distress over her dwindling finances, forcing her to expedite the sale of her house for survival. Following the divorce conclusion and the settlement of their assets, Gary opted for a modest apartment while he valued his independence and wished not to impose on our new life. We continued to support him financially, able to do so comfortably. This series of events, while tumultuous, reinforced our family bonds, underscoring the importance of integrity, support, and the true value of relationships over material gain.
Alina's ordinary Tuesday took a shocking turn when her husband Victor came home early from work. He looked serious and paced the kitchen. "We need to talk," he said. "I've met someone else. She's younger, more exciting. Let's handle this like adults, no drama." Alina froze, the knife in her hand still hovering over the vegetables. She was 43, not old, but Victor spoke as if she were useless. She set the knife down and turned to face him. Victor, 46, had recently dyed his gray hair and spent more time at the gym. Now, in a fancy suit, he looked like he was going through a midlife crisis. "How long?" Alina asked. 6 months, he said proudly. "She's 28 and works in our accounting department. You'll understand when you meet her. She's special." Alina noticed how he stressed the age difference minus 15 years younger. Their own daughter was only 6 years younger than this woman. "I'll be fair," Victor continued. "You can keep the apartment. I'll move in with Masha, that's her name. We'd already found a place." Alina stared at him. The apartment they worked so hard for was now his parting gift to her. "You've planned this well," she said, keeping her voice steady. "When do I meet her?" Victor hesitated, surprised at her calmness. "She's waiting downstairs. She can come up if you want." Alina smiled. "Please do invite her in. I'd love to meet the woman worth throwing away 18 years of marriage for." Victor quickly texted, and minutes later, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Alina held her breath as the door opened. Masha walked in. She was younger, yes, but something about her was oddly familiar. Then it hit Alina. She burst into laughter. Loud, uncontrollable laughter. Victor frowned. "What's so funny?" "Oh, Victor," Alina wiped her tears, still laughing. "Look at her closely. Don't you recognize her? She's Svetlana's daughter." Victor went pale. Svetlana, his old secretary, the one who tried to ruin his career with false accusations years ago. The woman Alina had helped him fight off. Masha's confident smile faded. "You know my mother." Alina smirked. "Know her? I saved Victor from her schemes, and now here you are continuing her work." Victor looked at Masha in horror. "Tell her she's wrong," he pleaded. But Masha said nothing. The clever, calculating look on her face said it all. Alina picked up her phone. "Let's call Svetlana. I'm sure she'd love to hear what her daughter is up to." Victor's face drained of color. His grand plan, his easy escape, had completely fallen apart. Alina smiled, sharp and knowing. "Shall we sit down? We have a lot to discuss." The room was silent as they sat around the dining table, the same table where they had once shared family meals and celebrations. Now it felt like a negotiation table. Masha kept glancing at her phone, looking uneasy. Victor had his head in his hands, mumbling, "Impossible." Meanwhile, Alina calmly poured tea as if nothing unusual was happening. "So Masha," Alina said, placing the teapot down, "how much do you know about your mother's past with Victor?" I don't know what you mean," Masha replied, though her shaky hands gave her away. Alina smiled and picked up her tablet. "Let me remind you, 15 years ago, your mother, Svetlana, worked as Victor's secretary. She accused him of harassment and demanded a huge payout. But what she didn't know was that I had installed security cameras in his office." Victor lifted his head in shock. "You put cameras in my office?" "Of course," Alina said smoothly. "You were too worried about your reputation to think clearly. I had to protect you." She turned back to Masha. "Your mother was very convincing, crying, ripping her blouse, making threats. But everything was caught on video." Masha's face turned pale. "You still have those recordings? And a signed confession from your mother, admitting she lied?" Alina nodded. "I kept everything. I had a feeling it might come in handy one day." Victor now stared at Masha. "So was anything real? These past 6 months?" Before Masha could answer, Alina's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled. "Perfect timing. Your mother is on her way up." Masha's eyes widened in panic. "You called her?" "I texted her an hour ago," Alina said cheerfully. "Told her I had some interesting news about her daughter." The doorbell rang. Masha looked terrified. Alina got up to answer it, leaving Victor and Masha frozen in place. Svetlana entered the apartment, looking older but still carrying the same sharp energy. However, when she saw Masha, she stopped in her tracks. "Masha? What are you doing here?" "Hello, Svetlana," Alina greeted. "Please join us. We were just talking about family traditions." "Mother, I can explain," Masha started, but Svetlana cut her off with a glare. "Explain what? That you tried the same stupid trick that ruined my career? That got us banned from every company in the city?" Svetlana turned to Alina. "I swear I didn't know she was doing this." After what happened, Alina reminded her, "You signed a confession and promised never to do it again. But did you ever tell your daughter about that?" Victor finally spoke, his voice weak. "So this was all a setup? From the beginning?" Svetlana sighed. "Oh, Victor, you always fall for a pretty face." Masha suddenly stood. This isn't how it was supposed to go. Alina was supposed to freak out, demand half of everything. Then we would have leverage. Alina shook her head. Another blackmail attempt. Looks like history really does repeat itself. Svetlana grabbed Masha's arm. "We're leaving. And you and I," she said firmly, "are going to have a long talk about making stupid choices." Before leaving, she looked at Alina with regret. "I truly am sorry. I thought I had changed. I guess I didn't teach my daughter well enough." Once they were gone, the apartment fell silent. Victor sat still, staring at his untouched tea. "Alina," he finally said, barely above a whisper, "I've been such a fool." "Yes," Alina agreed simply as she gathered the teacups. "Yes, you have." But now came the real question. Whether it was a setup or not, Victor had been willing to throw away 18 years of marriage for someone younger. As she washed the cups, Alina wondered, was there anything left to save? Or had Victor broken something that could never be fixed? The next few weeks passed in a blur of awkward silences and careful conversations. Victor moved into the guest room without being asked, seeming to understand that he'd lost the right to share their marital bed. He stopped dyeing his hair, abandoned his expensive new wardrobe, and the gym membership card disappeared from his wallet. But it wasn't enough. One evening, as Alina sat in the living room reviewing work documents, Victor approached with 2 cups of tea, a peace offering that had become his nightly ritual. "I've been thinking," he said, setting down her cup, "about everything. About us." Alina looked up from her papers, studying the man she'd spent nearly 2 decades with. The gray was returning to his temples, and he looked older now, not because of his age, but because of the weight of his actions. "I've been thinking too," she replied, accepting the tea. "Remember when we first bought this apartment? We could barely afford the down payment." Victor nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "You insisted we could make it work." said we'd eat nothing but pasta for a year if we had to. And we practically did. Alina laughed softly. But we made it work. We always made things work, Victor. Until you decided we weren't worth the effort anymore. The smile faded from his face. I know saying I'm sorry isn't enough. What I did, what I was willing to do, it's not just about Masha, Alina cut in. It's about you being ready to throw away 18 years of marriage because you felt old. Instead of talking to me, instead of working through it together, you looked for an escape route. Victor sat heavily on the couch beside her. I was scared, he admitted. Watching the gray come in, feeling less energetic, seeing younger men at work getting promoted, I convinced myself I needed to prove something. And did you? Prove anything? Yes, he said quietly. I proved I could be an absolute idiot who nearly destroyed the best thing in his life. Alina set down her tea and turned to face him fully. I'm not going to lie. Part of me wants to throw you out, file for divorce, and start fresh. But another part of me remembers the man who held my hand through 16 hours of labor, who stayed up all night helping our daughter with her science projects, who supported my career even when your mother said a wife shouldn't outshine her husband. Tears were flowing freely down Victor's cheeks now. I don't deserve another chance. No, Alina agreed, you don't. But marriage isn't about what we deserve. It's about what we're willing to fight for. She reached for her bag and pulled out 2 pieces of paper. So I made an appointment for us. Victor took the papers, reading them through watery eyes. Marriage counseling. Twice a week for the next 3 months. Consider it your last chance, Victor. We either fix this together, or we end it properly, not with some midlife crisis escape plan, but with dignity and honesty. Anything he said immediately, I'll do anything. Good. Alina stood up, gathering her work papers. Because our first session is tomorrow morning at 9. Don't be late. 6 months later, Alina and Victor sat in the same kitchen where he'd once announced his plans to leave. But this time, they were celebrating. Their daughter was coming home for the weekend, and they were preparing her favorite meal together. You're getting flour everywhere. Alina laughed as Victor attempted to roll out dough for pelmeni. Hey, I'm learning, he protested, but his eyes sparkled with joy. Real joy, not the artificial excitement he displayed during his crisis. The counseling had worked wonders, helping them rebuild not just their marriage, but themselves as individuals. Victor had finally confronted his aging anxiety, while Alina learned to express her needs more openly. They'd rediscovered each other, not as the young couple they once were, but as the mature partners they'd become. As they worked together in the kitchen, their shoulders occasionally brushing, Alina realized something important. Sometimes it takes nearly losing everything to appreciate what you have. Their marriage wasn't perfect, no relationship is, but it was genuine, tested by fire and stronger for it. When their daughter arrived that evening, she found her parents dancing in the kitchen to their old wedding song, covered in flour and laughing like teenagers. She snapped a picture and posted it online with the caption, "My parents, relationship goals for 18 years and counting." Victor saw the post later and showed it to Alina with tears in his eyes. "We made it," he whispered. "Yes," she smiled, taking his hand. "We did. And this time, let's keep making it work. No more drama needed." The Sunday dinner table went silent. My heart pounded as my mother-in-law's words filled the air like poison. My husband, Thomas, held my hand under the table but said nothing. "Excuse me," I finally whispered. "What do you mean my children don't deserve any inheritance?" Patricia, my mother-in-law, wiped her mouth with a napkin and looked at me coldly. "It's simple, Sophia. Blood is thicker than water. When Thomas's father and I pass away, everything should go to our real grandchildren, Amanda's kids." I glanced at my children, Emma, 8, and Lucas, 6, who were focused on their tablets in the living room, unaware of their grandmother's cruel words. They were adopted, something Patricia never let me forget. "Mom, that's enough," Thomas finally said, but his voice was weak, as always when facing his mother. "I'm just being practical," Patricia continued, piling more roast beef onto her plate. "Amanda's kids are our flesh and blood. They should get the family estate, the summer house, and the investments. That's only fair." I thought about our small 3-bedroom home, which Thomas and I worked hard to afford. Meanwhile, Patricia and her husband lived in a huge mansion and owned a vacation house they barely used. And what about Emma and Lucas? I asked, my voice stronger now. They're your grandchildren too. We adopted them as babies. They've never known another family. Patricia laughed coldly. Raising someone else's children doesn't make them family. Amanda's kids carry our DNA. They deserve to continue our legacy. Anger boiled inside me. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Thomas, we're leaving. My husband looked torn, caught between me and his mother. Mom, you've gone too far, he said, but his voice was still weak. I'm just saying what everyone thinks, Patricia called as I gathered the kids. Ask Amanda, she agrees with me. The drive home was quiet, except for the kids chatting about their games. Thomas opened his mouth to speak but kept closing it. I stared out the window, holding back tears. I refused to let Patricia win, even from a distance. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat in our home office looking at old photos. One showed my father holding Emma the day we brought her home, his face full of pride. Another showed Lucas on his shoulders at the zoo, both laughing. My dad never treated them differently because they were adopted. He was the grandfather they deserved. Dad had passed away 6 months ago, and the pain was still fresh. He had been sick for a while. But his decline was sudden at the end. My mom was still grieving, and we hadn't gone through most of his things yet. He was a quiet, hard-working man who had been a financial advisor. He wasn't flashy, but he taught me to save and plan for the future. 2 days after that awful dinner, I got a call at work from an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Sophia Carter, this is James Wilson from Wilson and Associates Law Firm. I was your father's attorney. There's something important we need to discuss. Can you come to my office tomorrow? I agreed, curious. As far as I knew, Dad had a simple will. Everything went to Mom. What could this be about? The next morning, I sat across from Mr. Wilson, a serious-looking man in his 60s. He pulled out a thick folder. Your father was a remarkable man, Mrs. Carter, he said, and much more strategic than anyone realized. What I'm about to show you has been in place for over 8 years. He pushed a document toward me. As I read, my hands started shaking. This is the trust, Mr. Wilson explained. Your father set it up the day you adopted Emma, and he added to it when Lucas joined your family. I stared at the numbers on the page, unable to believe what I was seeing. This can't be right. Mr. Wilson smiled. Your father was excellent at his job, a great investor, and even better at keeping secrets. The trust now holds around $4.2 million. The room spun. Dad had always lived so simply. How had he saved so much? He wanted to make sure his grandchildren were taken care of. Mr. Wilson continued. All of them. This trust is ironclad. It can only be used for Emma and Lucas's education, home, and well-being. And he left you a letter. I reached for the envelope with shaking hands, thinking about Patricia's cruel words at dinner. If only she knew what was coming. I opened Dad's letter with shaking hands, recognizing his familiar neat handwriting. My dearest Sophia, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to tell you in person how proud I am of you and the family you've built. From the moment you and Thomas brought Emma home, and later Lucas, I knew these children were meant to be ours. Blood doesn't make a family, love does. I've spent years building this trust, knowing there might be people who would treat them differently because they're adopted. I wanted to ensure they would always have security and opportunities, no matter what. The money I've set aside came from my personal investments and savings. Your mother doesn't know about it, as I kept this separate from our family finances. Use it wisely, protect them fiercely, and remember that I love them as much as any grandfather could love his grandchildren. Love, Dad. Tears streamed down my face as I folded the letter. Even from beyond the grave, Dad was still protecting his family. That evening, I showed Thomas the trust documents and Dad's letter. His face went through a range of emotions: shock, disbelief, and finally, shame. I should have stood up to my mother more strongly, he admitted, running his hands through his hair. I never imagined your father had done something like this. The question is, I said carefully, what do we do now? Your mother made her feelings very clear about our children's place in the family. Thomas was quiet for a moment. We tell her. She needs to know she was wrong. I wasn't so sure. Maybe we should wait. But Thomas was already pulling out his phone. No, Mom needs to hear this now. We're having dinner at their house tomorrow night. The next evening, we arrived at Patricia's mansion. Amanda, Thomas's sister, was there with her 3 children. Perfect, an audience for whatever drama was about to unfold. Patricia was in rare form, having just returned from a luxury cruise. "Oh, Amanda dear, you must take your children on the Mediterranean cruise next summer. The connections they could make with the right sort of families would be invaluable for their future." I caught the emphasis on right sort of families and saw Thomas's jaw clench. "Actually, Mom," Thomas spoke up as the dessert was being served, "we have some news about our children's future." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Oh." Thomas looked at me and I nodded. He pulled out the trust documents. Sophia's father set up a trust for Emma and Lucas. It's worth over $4 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Amanda's fork clattered against her plate. Patricia's face went through several shades of red. That's impossible," she finally sputtered. "Your father was a simple financial advisor." "A very good one," I said quietly, "and one who believed that all his grandchildren deserved security and love." "Let me see those papers," Patricia demanded, snatching them from Thomas. Her eyes widened as she read. This is more than we have set aside for Amanda's children." Amanda leaned forward, her interest piqued. "What do you mean, Mom? How much do you have set aside for my kids?" Patricia's face paled. "That's not important right now." But Amanda wasn't letting go. "No, I want to know. You've been telling me for years how my children would inherit everything, how they'd be set for life. What's the actual number?" The cracks in Patricia's carefully constructed facade were starting to show. She stammered something about investments and property values. "Mom," Amanda pressed, "how much?" About $2 million, Patricia finally admitted. "But the property values." So all this time, Amanda interrupted, "All your talk about blood being thicker than water, about my children being the only true heirs, and they're actually getting less than their adopted cousins?" Patricia looked like she might faint. But there are real grandchildren." "They're all real," Thomas said firmly, finally finding his voice. "Emma and Lucas are as much our children as if they'd been born to us." "Dad understood that, Mom. Why can't you?" I watched as Patricia's worldview crumbled in real time. Her perfectly planned family hierarchy was being upended by the quiet financial advisor she'd always looked down on at family gatherings. "I think," Amanda said, standing up, "that we should go. And Mom, maybe it's time to rethink some things." She gathered her children but paused at the door. "Sophia, I'm sorry for not speaking up before. You have beautiful children." As Amanda left, Patricia sat in her chair, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, the mighty matriarch brought low by her own prejudices. Thomas took my hand. "We should go too." But as we stood to leave, Patricia spoke in a small voice. Could I see the letter your father wrote?" I hesitated before handing over Dad's letter. It felt too personal, too precious to share with someone who would cause us so much pain. But something in Patricia's eyes, a glimmer of vulnerability I'd never seen before, made me reach into my purse and pull out the carefully folded paper. Patricia's hands trembled as she read. I watched her face change, saw tears form in her eyes for the first time in the 12 years I'd known her. "He wrote this when Emma was adopted?" she asked softly. I took a deep breath. "Dad added to the trust when we adopted Lucas. He believed family was about love, not blood." Patricia wiped her eyes with a fancy silk handkerchief. "Your father, he never said a word. All those years at family gatherings, he just smiled and played with the kids while I. She didn't finish, but she didn't have to. We all remembered her sharp comments, her cold stares, the way she always treated Emma and Lucas as outsiders. Suddenly, Patricia stood up. "I want to show you something," she said. "Thomas, you've never seen this either." She led us to her home office, a room I'd never been inside. From a bottom drawer, she pulled out an old photo album. "This is me," she said, pointing to a picture of a little girl with 2 adults. "With my adoptive parents." Thomas and I exchanged shocked looks. She had never told us this. "I was adopted when I was 6, Patricia said, her voice shaky. "I remember my birth parents. I remember feeling like I didn't belong. My adoptive parents were wonderful, but I always felt like an outsider." She flipped to another photo of herself as a teenager. "When I met Thomas's father, I was afraid his family wouldn't accept me if they knew I was adopted. So I lied. I made up stories about my childhood, about my family, and over time, I started to believe them myself." She looked down, guilt on her face. "I think that's why I was so cruel to Emma and Lucas. Seeing them so happy, so accepted, it brought back all the fears I had buried. I sat there, speechless. All these years, her judgment and cruelty had come from her own pain. "Mom," Thomas said gently, "why didn't you ever tell us?" "Because I was ashamed," she whispered, "and then I got so caught up in proving I belonged that I became the kind of person I used to fear." She turned to me, her mascara smudged. "Sophia, what your father did for Emma and Lucas, it's the same thing my parents did for me. They left me everything, their only child, adopted or not. And here I was, trying to deny your children the same love and security." A long silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of thunder in the distance. Patricia straightened her shoulders. "I want to make this right," she said. "Not just by changing my will. I will, by the way. But with time, with love. If you'll let me." I thought about all the hurt, all the times she had ignored my children, left them out of family moments. But I also thought about my father's letter, about his belief in love over blood. "We can start fresh," I said at last. "But it has to be real. No more comparing the kids. No more talk about real family." Patricia nodded. "I'd like to take Emma and Lucas for ice cream tomorrow. Just them. I have years of grandmother moments to make up for." Thomas squeezed my hand, relief in his eyes. His mother and I had finally found peace. The next day, I watched from the window as Patricia pulled up in her fancy car. Emma and Lucas ran outside, excited. Children forgive so easily. As they drove away, I reread Dad's letter. He had known. He had known my children might face rejection because they were adopted. But instead of fighting, he had protected them quietly, building a future no one could take away. A week later, Patricia invited everyone over, including Amanda and her kids. The children played in the backyard while we sat on the patio. Inside, a new family photo hung on the wall. This time, it included all of us. I watched Patricia teach Emma how to trim her roses. Lucas showed his cousins a new game on his tablet. I smiled, thinking of Dad. He had given us more than money. He had given us a chance to heal. That night, after everyone left, I found a letter in my purse, written in Patricia's elegant handwriting. "Dear Sophia, thank you for giving me the chance to be the grandmother your children deserve. Your father was a wise man who understood what I had forgotten. That family is built on love, not blood. I promise to honor his legacy by loving all my grandchildren equally, completely, and without reservation. With love and gratitude, Patricia, Mom, if you let me be that someday."